Nations of the $1 Million Round Table.
Being honorary Aussies for the next few minutes, you have to learn how to say
Al pasar la bandera de México, siendo yo...
Presentation of flags of every nation represented. We ask...
MDRT spoken here.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, the national anthem...
Yoel Tamari. Tell us a tale, little storyteller.
But with all due respect, not a tale of the ancients and not a story of today.
Tell us a story about the future.
I shall, my children, I shall. This is a story of a man, not unlike me, and what he learned from life. He's sitting at home one evening, and the phone rings.
What's a phone?
An enemy of isolation. The man stirs from his chair. The phone is insistent. Finally, he drags himself away from the television.
What's that?
A curse of the pharaohs. He picks up the phone, and it's Arnie Prentice, calling all the way from Seattle.
Where's Seattle?
What's an Arnie Prentice?
Shy children, you wish to learn, you got to listen.
Yes, of course, but please go on with your story.
I shall, my children, I shall. I shall speak of times and events far removed from the world you know. Yeah. Oh. So Arnie drops his bombshell. Will I speak at the Chicago meeting? On the main platform yet, says Arnie. Wow, now I don't get invited to speak here every day. So I decide that it has to be good, have punch, motivate, and above all has to be original and new. So I go back to the proceedings which MDRT publishes every year. I rediscover all the speeches of previous years. I relearn so many things that somehow got lost in the daily grind. In fact, my closing ratio improves and my sales go up. But I find that it's all been said before. King Solomon said, En chadash mitachat lashemesh. There is nothing new under the sun. So many great orators and agents have spoken so eloquently from this platform that there's really nothing new for me to say. So let me just tell you a little about myself, my country and my clients, and share with you experiences that have made me a more successful life insurance salesman. In a nutshell, what I have learned from life. Now, having quoted King Solomon, do you know that insurance isn't such a modern innovation? Since biblical times, an integral part of Jewish marriage has been the ketubah, or marriage contract. This ketubah was a promise by the groom to pay a large sum of money to his wife in the event of death or divorce. Now, under ancient law, only children could inherit, though they were duty-bound to provide for their widowed mother. The ketubah gave the wife a certain independence and self-respect in the event of widowhood and divorce. Or take Joseph. Now, he must have been the inventor of setting aside for a rainy day, even if it was a drought. You all remember how Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dream of 7 fat cows being gobbled up by 7 lean ones. He put 2 and 2 together and came up with the 7-year cycle syndrome. Saving surpluses during years of plenty for use during a famine is a basic element of modern economics, but it was a revolutionary idea 4,000 years ago. Joseph based his economic forecasts on dream analysis, a technique favored by many of today's investment counselors. Talking of lean years, I was born just before the great crash of 1929, though no link has been established between the two events. I was born in Germany, where my parents had planned to raise a family, as had 4 generations before them. This, however, was not to be. By 1933, a new regime had taken over, whose leaders whipped up a blind, mad hatred for the small but loyal Jewish minority, which had always served its fatherland well. By 1936, anti-Semitism had reached such proportions that my parents, with foresight which unfortunately not many shared, decided to pack up and start afresh elsewhere. Refugees were not particularly welcome anywhere, and to the free world's shame, most gates were shut tight. Eventually, South Africa granted us visas. My mother and I, each carrying 1 suitcase and 10 German marks, followed my father to start afresh in a country where we knew no one and whose language we couldn't speak. I will always remember the kindness of the people of South Africa who gave us a refuge where no one else would. What a change. I learned to play cricket and rugby and 2 new languages. Ja, ek praat ook Afrikaans. Although my father spent 5 years in the South African Army, we were spared the physical hardships of World War II. It was only after the war that we learned of the terrible fate that had befallen the Jews of Europe. Those of my aunts, uncles, and cousins who had remained behind had perished in the death camps. The shocking revelations convinced me that only a Jewish state could prevent a repetition of the Holocaust. When the state of Israel was established in 1948, I made up my mind to settle there. The 1947 United Nations vote on the partition of Western Palestine was joyfully received by Jews all over the world. We had achieved political independence in the land of our forefathers after 2,000 years of exile. Belonging to a Zionist youth movement, we had worked towards this goal for years, but I don't think any of us really believed it. Really believed that it would happen. I was 19 years old, and an age-old dream had become a reality. There was absolutely no doubt in my mind, if God in his wisdom was returning us to our homeland, my place was there. After a 3-day flight with a group of other young South Africans, we joined forces with young Israelis and a number of refugees from Europe. Together, we established a kibbutz on a hill in Galilee near Nazareth. Our purpose, to grow food for the young state, to defend its borders, and to absorb new immigrants. Our form of settlement, the kibbutz, was based on our belief that only by collective effort and great personal sacrifice could we achieve these goals. The kibbutz is the only successful communal experiment in the world, and it was successful because we came to it by choice. It was not forced upon us, as was the kolkhoz upon the Russian peasants. Now, for me, to tell this forum, this bastion of capitalism, that communal living and working can be successful, even richly rewarding, a smack of heresy. But believe me, at that time, and even now, to those who can adapt to it, kibbutz living is a system of great merit. I was a shepherd on kibbutz Timorim, and every day, summer and winter, I roamed the hills of Galilee with my flock, seeking out the best pastures. King David, the most famous of shepherds, probably wandered over these same paths and fields with his flock. Jesus certainly knew these hills, as Nazareth was but a 10-minute walk away. What stories these rocks could have told me of people and events that happened thousands of years ago on those very same hills. What an experience for a 20-year-old returning to his people's homeland after 2,000 years of dispersion. Israel is holy to 3 great religions. It is blessed with a wonderful climate, beautiful scenery, ancient history, and no natural resources whatsoever. Half the country was desert and had been sadly neglected for generations. Yet all it really needed was love, affection, and work, and Jews all over the world were impatient to smother their re-established state with just that. This ingathering of exiles placed an enormous financial burden on the young state. Attacked at birth by 7 Arab armies, it barely survived its first year. After a miraculous victory, we began the task of rebuilding a new economy. Housing, food, roads, electricity, the massive expenditures forced up prices and sowed the seeds of the galloping inflation that was to come. When I arrived in 1949, the Jewish population had already increased from 650,000 to nearly 1 million. The 150,000 Arab citizens who had chosen to remain have by now become over 750,000. And today our population is over 4 million people. Who were these new immigrants? The remnants of European Jewry who had somehow survived Hitler's death camp, survivors of the Marquis and the partisans, a pitiful collection of homeless, destitute, sick and crippled souls, broken in soul and spirit. These people had lost everything, especially their belief in the future, in raising families and acquiring possessions, who arrived with the shirts on their back and nothing else. Then there were the refugees from Arab lands, where life had become both intolerable and dangerous. These refugees had left behind their often substantial belongings. And then there were the Jews from the free world, healthy and fit, with trades and management ability, sometimes even capital. These three groups mingled and intermarried, building a future in the modern state we know today. How did this diverse population react to the idea of placing their financial future and security of the loved ones in the hands of financial institutions such as insurance companies? Israel's early settlers represented an interesting variety of cultures and backgrounds. Those from Central Europe certainly knew what life insurance was. They had seen their savings and cover wiped out twice by 2 world wars. People from communist countries had no knowledge of life insurance. Their widows and orphans are provided for by the state, at least in theory. Jews from Arab lands presented the insurance agent with a different problem altogether. In their society, as in that of our Arab citizens, the Hamula, or clan, provided for widows and orphans. And don't let's knock it. In a society of large families, many children, and possibly more than one wife, this system has proved its worth since time immemorial. In the early days, the only real market was amongst immigrants from English-speaking countries. The first policies were 20-year endowment, but they were better than no insurance at all. And that, for you, my children, is all. But for you, the story goes on. Pixie and I were married on my 21st birthday, and we had 3 sons, Shlomo, Michael, and Danny. Timorim had prospered, and by 1960, we decided to try our luck in the big city. Now, employment for shepherds is limited in Tel Aviv. Very limited. And since I've now brought my story up to modern days, allow me to remove these robes and carry on from here. Thank you very much. I let them dress me up in alter schmatters, but I absolutely refuse to sing. If I were a Rothschild. All right. Now that this is what I'm. Now that I've returned to the present, let me say Boker Tov, which means good morning, And come back to my story, as Pixie and I were blessed with our only daughter, Olna. With her arrival, we needed additional income, so I became a traveling salesman. In 1969, I was recruited by an international mutual fund, which was making its investors and salesmen rich, but rich. Hiring me was a mistake. Remember when I was born? That's right, 29. What happened 6 months later? Crash. I hadn't been with them a year when Bernie Kornfeld's iOS empire collapsed. I don't say it was my fault, but they should have known better. One thing I had learned at iOS, and that was how to sell. A few of us ex-mutual fund salesmen banded together and we started selling life insurance. But we were dispirited and afraid of seeing clients. We had offered them riches, only to see their money dwindle away. With time, we regained confidence. But I had also learned a very valuable lesson. Unlike the insurance business, the mutual fund sale had been based not on need, but on greed. I overcame my fear of seeing prospects, but as a result of the iOS crash, I had no money, no car, and lots of debts. With 4 kids at home, Pixie couldn't go out to work. One day I came home with an idea. If we sell our apartment and rent a smaller one, we can settle up our debts and buy a car, I told my wife. With a clear head and a used car, I can make a success of selling life insurance. What do you think? And I shut up. The silence lasted a week. And then Pixie... Yes. And then Pixie told me what she thought. Yes, she had confidence in my ability and was prepared to sacrifice her home. I'm forever in debt to her for her trust. Since that day, we've never looked back. I've made MDRT every year since 1976. And 6 years ago, we bought a new apartment, even larger than the one that we'd sold. My first MDRT meeting was in Atlanta in 1977. Unforgettable. It was mind-boggling, especially coming from a small country. I was suddenly part of an international organization where people exchanged ideas, gave advice, and made a new boy feel welcome. I'll never forget the esteem I felt for men and women sitting with me who sold and earned perhaps 20 times what I didn't, yet treated me as a welcome colleague. I discovered that these giants of our industry, these legends in their lifetime, were warm human beings. On my return, we set about organizing a club for Israeli MDRT members. Most of our 25 or so members welcomed the idea, and the benefits were immediate. The Agents Association, however, a rather lethargic body, told us we could meet socially or have lectures, but not to interfere in insurance politics. So we encouraged our members to take a more active role in association affairs, and within a short time, most of the leading positions were filled by MDRT members. Today, I'm happy to say we work in utmost harmony. 8 years ago, the association organized our first Life Congress. It's now an annual event and takes place in Jerusalem. Mil Grauer, then MDRT president, joined our meeting in 1980 and established MDRT participation in our activities. It has been our pleasure and privilege to meet many MDRT greats, and long-lasting friendships have been forged. Frank Friedler, Arnie Prentice, and Wilma Poyne have all graced our platform. Ben Feldman and his study group joined us in 1984 for a Congress that will be long remembered. I'm happy to tell you that there's a substantial contingent of Israeli members here this morning, and I'm proud to ask them to stand and accept your welcome. Kumu Fedraya. Thank you. Thank you very much. In Israel, our task as life insurance salesmen is not made more difficult by the recurring wars. All men serve in the army for 3 years and girls for 2. Reserve duty is 1 month per year till age 55. The Israeli ratio between frontline and rear echelon soldiers is the highest in the world, which means that most men are fully aware of their vulnerability. In 1973, on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, Egyptian and Syrian forces attacked simultaneously on 2 fronts. Our eldest son, Shlomo, had recently completed his conscript service and had married 3 months previously. We both rushed to join our units in a procedure well rehearsed for just such an occasion. Our second son, Michael, 20 years old, was manning his tank facing the Egyptian onslaught. We'd expected him home on leave for the holidays, and when he didn't arrive, we assumed there was some flap on. There were always alerts every time the Egyptians moved some troops on the other side of the canal. It happened before, nothing serious. Little did we know. Michael and I served in the same division. By midnight, I was near the front, where Michael's brigade was trying to hold back the enemy. The sight that greeted us at daybreak, the many casualties, the destroyed armor, theirs and ours, the constant air attacks, made it impossible to read any sort of sense into the situation. And somewhere in that inferno was our Michael. This was the first war my sons were also fighting, and the fear I felt for them was unlike anything I'd experienced in previous wars. I remember telling Pixie as we heard the first reports from the front on the radio, "Don't worry, he's a highly trained professional, and that will keep him safe." I had my first doubts when I saw what was happening on the battlefield. Every time I saw someone from headquarters, I asked after Michael, but no one could tell me anything. Everything was in shambles, and no casualty lists had been issued. I managed to phone home a couple of times. Yes, Shlomo had phoned, he's safe and well. No news from Michael. On the 8th day of the war, the first of many casualty lists was published. Sergeant Yoel Tamari, killed in action. 1,400 hours on Yom Kippur. He had lived for 20 years, trained for 2, and fought like a tiger for 2 hours. May his memory be forever blessed. Losing a parent is very sad, but that is the natural way of things. We insurance people certainly know the effects of losing a spouse. We can ease the financial loss, but we know that there's no life insurance policy to replace the love and affection of a lost wife or a husband. But losing a child is surely the cruelest fate that can befall a parent, though the fact that Michael died defending his country is some small solace. Our life is now divided into 2 periods. Before the Yom Kippur War and after. Since that day, nothing has or ever will be the same again. But survival instincts take over whether we wish it or not. It was the first time my wife and I had faced close personal tragedy. Both her parents and mine were alive and well. She and I were healthy, and we still had 3 wonderful children and a daughter-in-law. Thank God for our children, not that having 3 makes us miss Michael any less, but they give us daily reasons to go on living and enjoying it. We learned that work and activity are great healers. The mind cannot concentrate on more than one thing at a time. Sometimes I would walk out of a sales meeting and say to myself, for 2 hours I haven't thought of Michael. I was busy selling. And at first my conscience bothered me, but I've learned that that is as it must be, and life must go on. I learned to cry openly for the first time in my life. I learned that if you keep it all in, somewhere along the line, you'll explode. Sorrow must be shared and shown. But we learned that this also has its limits. If your home becomes a memorial and you cover yourself with a mantle of mourning, friends, relations, and yes, even your children will gradually avoid you. A good insurance agent must know so much. Products, tax laws, investments, all make it possible for us to tackle our clients' problems intelligently. But the greatest knowledge is understanding people, and that can't be got from books. We must learn from life, and I have through age and experience. Consider this. I'm a son, a husband, a father, and a grandfather. Each relationship has its own responsibility and commitment, its own source of understanding and empathy. My parents' situation has taught me the necessity of saving for old age. And as they grow older, both are in their 80s, I find myself convincing clients to prepare for longer retirement. People are living longer, people can work longer. As financial advisors, we can and must ensure that higher life expectancy will not put our clients into a living bankruptcy. As a husband, I've often told a prospect who envisaged his widow selling the home, taking a job, living on less, of my firm belief that my wife is my partner. She went through the hard years with me and is certainly entitled to that prosperity which usually only comes with middle age, even if I'm not around to provide it for her. As a father and grandfather, I can talk of my feeling of security, which comes from knowing that my children's futures are secure, no matter what happens to me. Now, I tell my clients that my children, now all married, have sizable policies protecting my grandchildren's future. So you see, age and maturity do have their advantages. And I can make my points based on personal experience. Yes, I have learned from life. When prospects belittle their chances of falling ill, I offer to show them the scar from my open heart surgery 6 years ago. I've never hesitated to describe my feelings as I was being wheeled into the operating theater. I knew that come what may, my insurance policies would protect my family. And I'm anxious to share this feeling of security with my prospects. When a man buys a policy, does he not thereby fulfill, joyfully I hope, his sacred duty as a father and as a husband? Of course, getting on in years can have its disadvantages too. 25-year-old client once asked me who would handle his insurance problems later on. He obviously didn't expect me to be around for another 30 years. That problem was solved 3 years ago when my youngest son, Danny, decided to join me in the business. He's brought new ideas and enthusiasms, and he's fearless in the face of the computer. Those of you with kids in the business know what a wonderful feeling it is to work with them. When a child joins a parent in his profession, he is in effect saying, "Dad, I admire what you're doing." I'm very proud that Danny's here this morning for his first meeting. Last year, my daughter Olna joined us too. I'm happy to say we make a great team. They've made it possible for me to attend the opening class of CLU in Israel. Our association has set up CLU studies after much preparation and with a great deal of help from CLU in the States. Class 1 has 1 more semester to go, and Class 2 is well on its way. Yes, I have learned from life. I've learned that while life is no picnic, it can be a ball. I've learned to give and take, and that giving is easier than taking. I've learned from life that there's love everywhere, and that even in the darkest moments, there's always the promise of a better future. But I've also learned that if we don't strive hard and well, that future promise will evade us. And I know that here is the place where we all give each other the helping hand in the upward climb to success. I thank the MDRT for the honor they've afforded me by asking me to speak to you. And I thank you all for your very kind attention and courtesy. Perhaps one day we will have the privilege of hosting the MDRT meeting in Jerusalem, the eternal city. Till then, shalom, and bless you all.
For those who wish to learn more about the Roundtable, there's the information-packed Invitation to Excellence. And in recognition of outstanding work in the life insurance profession, MDRT offers a wide range of insignia jewelry and membership plaques in honor of the finest in the business. Available to individual members of our industry is the MDRT Video Club, where, for a yearly membership fee, a wide range of titles can be borrowed. Historical retrospective of past annual meeting programs and the most up-to-date speeches by industry leaders add up to an invaluable source of education and motivation. Also available are hundreds of audio cassettes documenting speeches given at past MDRT annual meetings. Speeches dealing with a host of issues confronting the agent in this turbulent age of change, an age in which the Roundtable continues to thrive. The $1 Million Roundtable provides a host of products and services for the modern life insurance agent. These items can be found only in the Roundtable catalog. They are the products of years of exploration and experience, of those who have dared to dream. They are the tools of success.